Football and deep into a pennant race here in Baltimore. The Orioles taking on the Houston Astros all weekend long at Oriole Park at Camden Yards amongst the raindrops, the heat, the thunderstorms, and, of course, the Ravens out to Indianapolis where Andrew Luck and Joe Flacco are trying to find their way here in August. This guy's trying to find his way around the NFL. He has done it for many, many years, and nobody does it better. He's one of the Hall of Fame voters and one of the Talk of Fame network partners that we have here on Sunday afternoons. From the Dallas Morning News, he is one of our defending champions, and not just a football guy anymore. I've actually run into him at Rangers games. He is Rick Gosselin. You can follow his journey at Rick Gosselin DMN out on Twitter. That means Dallas Morning News. And if it's Dallas, Jerry Jones must be making some news. Y'all gonna put Jerry Jones in the Hall of Fame? What are you guys thinking, Goose?
It's a contributor category. And what he did, he changed the financial dynamic of the league. When he bought the Cowboys in 1989, he looked at the bottom line. There were two sources of revenue, TV and ticket sales. What he did, he showed the league how to market their stadiums. Right away, he cut deals with Nike, Pepsi, and American Express to be the official sponsor of Texas Stadium.
And he pissed off, at that point, 29 other owners, right? Because there weren't 32 at that point. Right?
You remember, he paraded Phil Knight onto the field, and there was a lawsuit filed. Well, Jones, of course, wins the lawsuit and showed teams that there's another way of making money besides the product on the field. So what that did was it triggered an explosion of stadiums. You had to own the lease to the stadium. So all these teams, the Pittsburgh left Three Rivers, Cincinnati left Riverfront, Eagles left the Vet. All these teams are sharing stadiums with baseball teams. They had to get their own buildings to sell the suites, to sell the sponsorships. And a big part of the stadium explosion, all that money was dumped into the shared revenue pot. And that's why the salary cap has gone from $34 million in 1994 to $155 million in 2016. And that's Jones showing people how to make money, how to grow the pot. Also, he's the guy that stood up in 1993 after Art and Tagliabue said, we got to give money back to the networks. He said, no, we're not going to give money back to the networks. And instead of giving money back, they got Fox involved in the bidding. The revenues grew by 20% in the next contract, and there's been an explosion of TV money. So both stadiums and TV money are in Jerry's back pocket. He's made a lot of money for a lot of players and a lot of owners.
I would say if I were in the room, and I maybe I'm wrong about this, you were around more than I, but the pre-salary cap, part of that was baseball getting out of whack, where the Yankees and Dodgers had more money, the Cubs and the Braves maybe with television had more money than anybody else, and that era. I mean, I've been on the air 25 years. Jerry was winning Super Bowls, pissing everybody off, but more than that, if there was no salary cap, he would have paid Troy Aikman a ranch in Oklahoma to keep him around, and the salary cap's the one thing that's made the NFL over my lifetime, my quarter of a century doing radio, better than the other sports because Jacksonville can win. You know what I mean? Smaller markets can win, and even though in Dallas he owned the Yankees of his league, there was a sort of socialism that went beyond all of these Republican guys that sort of ran these things. Jerry became a part of what we know the modern NFL to be, which is sort of fair because he had more money and he was ready to bleed more money, and he was clearly smarter at making money than Art Modell and some of the old line owners. It could have been an out-of-whack league where every Bruce Smith and every Deion Sanders would have wound up in Dallas, maybe the way Danny wants to do in D.C. over the last 20 years.
Yeah, and that's why Tagliabue was the other contributor nominee. The salary cap was his baby. He knew that if he was going to give, he needed something in return for free agency. The league was speeding toward free agency, and he had to get something back. And he was the guy that created the salary cap. And all the owners bought in, and for good reason. Look at the league now. It is the most popular sport in football. The NFL is the most popular TV product because anybody can win. Like you said, Jacksonville can win. For the longest time, they said, a little Green Bay can win. Well, Green Bay is now essentially financially a big market team. But the Jacksonvilles and the Carolinas and the smaller markets, Cincinnati's, they can compete for championships because they're all playing on a level financial field. And that's in large part due to Jones growing the money and Tagliabue implementing the salary cap.
So Tagliabue's the other guy that has been put up here. I ran into Paul last year with Ted Leone just in D.C. and chatted with him. He's kind of a different guy in retirement, not wearing, the shield hat that he had on for 2 decades. Contributions for him, what would you say other than the salary cap? Give me a few other things that when you're going to get in a room talking about Paul Tagliabue, what are his contributions other than picking up where Pete Rozelle kind of left off? I mean, he was left a sport in pretty decent shape to grow. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Labor peace for 18 years. He got through some very difficult negotiations, including the negotiation that gave the player free agency. But there were no work stoppages during his tenure. There were 2 work stoppages under Rozelle and another work stoppage under Goodell.
And real fake football under Rozelle. They played fake football, right?
Yeah. I remember those days. That was terrible. In '87 they had the strike players, and in '81 they talked about it. '82 they talked about it but didn't do it. That was a mistake. But no, he gave him 18 years of labor peace. He's in large part credited, along with Jones, with the TV money growing, the stadium explosion. The league grew and became the dominant sporting force that it became under his regime, more so than Rozelle, even because of the money.
For some of these guys, and how many people on the committee now? About 50 on the Hall of Fame committee?
48 now. They're adding 2 new voters. They're having 2 Hall of Famers enter the room in the media. James Lofton and Dan Fouts last year monitored the meeting. This year they will be active participants and have a vote. They wanted to give the Hall of Famers a vote, so there'll be 48 in the meeting. You need 38 votes to gain induction. If you have 10 no votes, you're not going to get in.
Rick Gosselin joining us here, the Goose from Dallas Morning News. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Rick Gosselin DMN. Also a radio host at Talk of Fame Network that's heard here on Sundays on WNST as well. And I guess for some of these guys, and I know Bobby Beathard's name was floated, Steve Sable's name was floated. To me, Steve Sable's going to be in Canton. Bobby Beathard's going to be in Canton at some point. And I think Jerry Jones and Tagliabue are going to be in Canton at some point. Some of this to me is semantics about when, not if. And I know Art Modell's not going to get in anymore, and we'll sit here and argue that with all 48 of you. And, I'll do that till I'm blue in the face as well to the bitter end. But for most guys, if you're a Hall of Famer, you're going to, Ed Reed and Ray Lewis are going to get in. It's just a matter of when. And I feel that way about a lot of these contributors. Just the fact that they get the attention of people like you and the voters. I don't think anybody's going to make a case against Paul Tagliabue. Maybe this year they will, but in the end, he'll get into the Hall of Fame, right?
You would think, and that's the problem we've got. I've been on the senior committee for over 10 years, and, we come up with 1 or 2. I've got a list that I put together back in 2004 when I went on the committee. There are 200 names in that list of players that I think need to be discussed. They may or may not be Hall of Famers, but they need to be discussed. Guys that were all-decade league MVPs, passing champions, rushing champions, receiving champions, sack champions, and most of them have never even been in the room. If you didn't win a championship or you played defense, there's a good chance you're going to slip through the cracks.
So that really is playing defense. It's like being a punter, right? We love the ball, right? We love wide receivers and running backs and quarterbacks, right?
We love stats. This committee loves stats. And defensive guys have historically struggled. There are almost twice as many offensive players in Canton as defensive. But getting back to it, the problem is, so on this list, I get to bring out 1 a year, maybe 2 a year. You never whittle away the list, and that's the way it is with the contributors. We felt the need to establish that category to give owners, commissioners, personnel directors, people like that, general managers, a chance to get busts in Canton. They're deserving people, but as long as they're competing with players, they're not going to get in. So we form this committee to pick a contributor, and we get to put in 1 a year or 2 a year. Then there are I'd say 15 really strong contributor candidates. You mentioned some of them. A couple owners, Kraft, Bolin, will be in that mix. Gil Brandt has been in that mix. You said Sable. I really think there should be a referee somewhere in the Hall of Fame.
How's Gil Brandt not in the Hall of Fame, Goose? Especially you being down in Dallas. How's that possible?
We've never had this category. And he's been in the discussions each of the last 3 years, but we put in owners and general managers and now potentially a commissioner over Gil. it's just like you said, it's a selection process, and you got to work your way through it. And no one gets in as fast as a fan base would like. You know, the Baltimore people would have hoped that Modell would have been in 10 years ago. And I like you, I am a Modell guy. I think Art Modell belongs in the Hall of Fame. But that's
why I like you, Goose. I mean, that's why I let you on the show. You know,
that's a fight we've fought and lost on a handful of occasions to this point. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets one last look, but I think it's got to be down the road after there's been some turnover on the committee. Let some fresh opinions.
Well, I'm ready to get on the committee anytime you need me. I'm up here in Baltimore. You know what? Being on the committee, and I've talked to so many of you, and I'm friends with so many of you. You know, it would be one of the great honors of my life. But I would also look at it and say, boy, that's a hell of a commitment. That's a lot of work. I mean, I know a lot of you really well, and I know it takes up large stretches, not just of your Twitter feeds and your mind space, but, I mean, you flew out to Canton a couple days ago. I mean, earlier in the week to sit on a committee. You were out there a week and a half ago. You know, it takes up a lot of Super Bowl week. It takes up a lot of headspace. It takes up a lot of headspace every press box you walk into. We just got some guy like me yelling, put Art Modell in the Hall of Fame, Goose. What the hell's wrong with you? I mean, it was the Art Monk thing for a decade, right? Every time you went to D.C., I'm sure. So, I mean, and it is something that people take seriously. More than that, I want to give you a chance to spread out a little bit on the Canton thing because that place has gotten better, right? I mean, they really have turned it into Disney World, and it's really unfortunate what happened to the field out there a couple weeks ago because it makes the whole thing look like a charade.
Yeah, in 3 years when this whole project's done, there's going to be a 4-star hotel on the campus. They're going to have spaces to hold conventions and meetings, and the Hall of Fame experience. It's gotten so much better than it was 5 years ago. And it's going to be a destination place for football. I would not be surprised if in 2019, the 100th anniversary, the NFL gives the draft to Canton.
Wow.
And I think that would be a huge step. I'm not sure that they want to keep this Hall of Fame game going. You know, there are too many preseason games, exhibition games, as you and I would know them, as there is. But, you know, making the Hall of Fame a destination spot, get them in the draft, you know, they'll probably have the officials meeting there. They'll do a lot of more functions and events in Canton. But, you know, we talk about the committee. It's really a thankless job. No matter who you pick, it's the wrong guys. Like we came out with Jones and Tagliabue, and we're just getting hammered from the Bolin group. How can you pick? It's atrocious. How can you pick Jerry Jones over Bolin? Well, we also have advisors that come in, consultants that come in, Hall of Famers that come in, and they have input in the process. They talk about Pat Bowlen. They talk about Jerry Jones. They talk about all the candidates. And we weigh what they have to say. Their opinion carries weight. And the consultants were very strong on Jerry Jones and Paul Tagliabue. And that weighed into the selections of those two men. But the bottom line is, you know, like when we do the seniors, we pick Kenny Easley. You're going to hear from 31 other teams, well, why did you pick so? Why did you pick Johnny Robinson? Why did you pick Alex Karras? Why did you pick one of our guys? You know, we can never pick the right guys in the forum of public opinion.
But you're so well compensated for being on the Hall of Fame committee.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's certainly worth the grief that we take.
He is Rick Gosselin from the Dallas Morning News. All right, so let's get on to the field here. And this year, I mean, you're chasing the Cowboys around. I know you also do a lot of work with the Rangers as well as the hockey team down there in Dallas doing a full column now. And I'll even give you a chance to stretch out on the Rangers because the Orioles are hoping to see them at some point in October as well. But for the Cowboys, you know, the whole division's kind of choppy, right? You know, I talk to people in Philadelphia, Washington. There's reasons to like or not like all of these teams, but with the Cowboys, it always comes back to Romo, right?
Yeah, I think a 9-7 record will win this division, as it did last year. This team doesn't have a defense. They don't have a pass rush. You know, Jerry Jones went into the offseason thinking we have to upgrade our backup quarterback and our pass rush. They did neither. So they got a pass rush that on paper, in September, will have fewer than 15 sacks. The leading sacker on that defense in September, career sacker, will be a cornerback, Orlando Scandrick. They have no pass rush. They have no playmakers. There's only one player on this entire defensive depth chart who's ever been to a Pro Bowl, and that was Sean Lee, and he went as an injury replacement. There's no playmakers. There's no pass rush. That's why they drafted Elliott. They feel let's get a ball control game going and try to keep our defense off the field. But the bottom line is the greatest ball control teams in history only had the ball for 33 minutes. The 85 Bears with Walter Payton in that defense, the defense still had to play 27 minutes a game. And I don't think you can hide the defensive deficiencies this team has. They're going to have to score 600 points to do that, and I'm not sure they're capable given the fact they want to have a ball control scheme. I like Washington. I think the Giants, you got to keep an eye on. They did a lot of things this offseason, free agency and the draft, to fix their woeful defense. But again, anybody can win. And I think the Eagles would be a long shot because of the quarterback situation. But the other three, I wouldn't be surprised if they're all sitting there at 7-7 in the month of December trying to sort this thing out.
You know, we're coming down to Dallas weekend before Thanksgiving. I hope you'll have some pumpkin pie waiting for me down there. We get our trip down to Jerry's World, and it still is kind of a marvel, right? I mean, you're there, you go to work there, you've seen the thing pop up. There's been nothing that rivals it, but I know having seen the L.A. Memorial Coliseum on Saturday night, I was out with my wife having dinner. I looked up, and, I mean, it really kind of slapped me in the face. I've been sitting here covering this thing for years about the Chargers and the Rams and the Raiders, and now that football's back in L.A., we're going to see that sort of Jerry model plop down out there in Inglewood. And but you go to that stadium, and people here are all geared up about not just going to Dallas and seeing the Star and seeing the Cowboys, but really seeing the stadium. The stadium's become its own destination in a lot of ways.
They've got over $1 million worth of artwork on walls in the stadium. No one else has that. I mean, they're making a more of a cultural thing. You know, they make money hand over fist just with the tours of the stadium. If I drove out to that stadium today to take a tour, and I got there at 1 o'clock, they'd say, well, you know, all the tours are booked. We can get you in on the 3:15 tour.
So they literally take 500 or 1,000 people through there every day, right?
Oh, yeah, that's... And the tour ends in the gift shop, of course.
Of course, has to. Every good tour does. Come on. They've been doing that in Hershey since I was a kid, you know.
Everybody's walking out with cowboy gear. No, the stadium really is a market. It was the first $1 billion stadium. I think the L.A. stadium is going to be closer to $3 billion, but they have the labor costs in California that you don't have in Texas. So I still think Jerry could have the best stadium going, even after the L.A. Stadium is built.
Goose Goslin has seen the league evolve over many, many years, almost 4 decades now, down there in Dallas, covering the Cowboys. He's on the Hall of Fame committee and on the Talk of Fame network that you hear here each and every Sunday on WNST right after noon when Dennis goes away as well. All right, so Goose, last thing for you, Rangers, a little baseball. I know you love baseball. You like getting out there. They're building a new stadium there as well to sort of, Jerry's going to get a baseball stadium built because the baseball stadium's not good enough anymore. And I know it's hot as hell down there. But, this Rangers team feels like it's holding up pretty well. The loss of Chin-Soo Shu, also a big story this week. But, trying to get the pitching together, they look as strong and as formidable as any team in the race right now.
They've been trying to get the pitching together all summer. It amazes me they've got the best record in the American League, given the problems they've had on their staff. They were without their numbers 2, 3, and 4 starters the better part of the year. Darvish, missed half the season. Holland has been all year. Colby Lewis has been out the last 2 months. They've been just getting by, with a patchwork rotation. They're going to get Holland back. They got Darvish and Hamels going now. A.J. Griffin's been a bit of a surprise. Yeah, if they can get the rotation in some kind of semblance of order by September, they're going to be tough to beat. Getting Lucroy from Milwaukee was a huge get. Catching has been a problem with this team. They've been running 3 guys through there based on pitching matchups. Now they just write this kid down, and he's very worth a home run every 2 nights. So that solved the big issue. On the bullpen, they've got probably 5 or 6 quality arms down there. If they can get the starters, they can get them into the 6th, 7th innings, they can close out games. Part of the problem they've got now is the bullpen's been so worn out by the lack of quality starts that this team has had. But if they get the rotation back, the bullpen will be fine. I
mean, John Daniels, boy wonder, has come down there and really operates at a different radar, I think, working down there. And they haven't won a World Series, but boy, it's about a breakout thing for him in years when Darvish, who would be, you called him number 2, he'd be a number 1 around here if he were right. He'd be a number 1 down there if they, hadn't dealt for a guy even better than him. And then Fielder, all the money that was spent on him and where he is. And the fact that they have such a robust minor league system, which is, Goose, that's the thing that's missing here. I mean, we went through the trading deadline. This team is finally at a point where they could win, could do something over there. They have no one in their minor league system about to come up. They have no one in the pipeline that's tradable, and yet you see these other organizations like the Rangers where every year they can go out and deal from the bottom up because they have talent at the major league level, and they've always got this pipeline of young talent.
And they're so high on this talent. They went into the trade deadline needing a starting pitcher, but they were not going to give up. They got some elite-level prospects. Joey Gallo, Jurickson Profar, Nomar Mazaro. They were not going to give these guys up. They said, we'd rather keep our powder dry, keep these guys, than give them up for a rental or a starting pitcher that may be there for maybe 2 seasons.
Well, it's one thing giving up for Cole Hamels, another thing giving up for James Shields or Drew Pomerantz, right?
Yeah, well, except that the Jake Thompson kid was a pretty good pitcher who's now on the Eagles that went in the, on the Phillies who went in the Cole Hamels deal. But they had, during the trade deadline, they had inquiries about 28 of their prospects. Now think about that. People are going to trade the Rangers a starting pitcher, and they inquired about 28 different prospects in their system.
The Orioles don't have 3, dude. The Orioles don't have 3 people that anybody would even ask for, literally. And that's kind of scary over the next 5 years because they already have the most talent. They're amassing money. They're about to get a new stadium, which should lead to some more money. But on top of that, they've got a kid who knows what he's doing, apparently, right, in John Daniels.
Oh, without question. Every trade deadline, he seems to come up with a key piece. Getting Cole Hamels was a steal, and now getting Lucroy was a steal. He finds a way to make this team better. When it doesn't appear, he's going to make them better. I think he's a front runner for Executive of the Year. For this team to be sitting where they're at with the starting rotation issues they've had is a testimony to the team that John Daniels has built.
If I gave you $1 right now, you're going to bet it on them playing in the World Series this year? Do you believe that they're of that medal this year, that you're cordoning off that last week of October to be with them maybe instead of being with the Cowboys?
Yeah, I do like the fact they've got Hamels and Darvish pitching the first 2 games of any series. If they can get through a third game, if they can steal a game with whether it's Kobe Lewis or A.J. Griffin or Derek Holland, I think they can go in a short series with just about anybody. Well,
they've kind of babied Darvish in getting him back, knowing the most important pitches he's going to throw are the ones in October, not the ones in July, right?
Yeah. They always look at the long term, which is why they didn't deal any of these prospects. They sitting, Fielder out. They had him out from middle of last season. They were not going to rush him back. Of course, he had issues that couldn't be solved, with surgery. But no, they always operate on the patience is the best philosophy mode.
All right, Goose. Well, the good news is Jerry's giving you a bye on the weekend of the 23rd, so Game 1 of the World Series, you'll be okay. So you got an Eagles home game the following week. Hey, we'll see you in November somewhere down the line. It's always great having you on. And, it's part of being on the voting committee. Take all the grief on the Jerry Jones thing. You're the Dallas guy. It's your fault Jerry's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm taking more heat from the Dallas people than I am nationally.
The worst part of Jerry is everybody hates Jerry on the outside, and then you spend any time with Jerry, and you can't not like him. If you spend 5 minutes with him, right?
He's the most resilient guy I've ever dealt with. He's of the belief all publicity is good publicity. Just spell Cowboys right in the headline.
And don't misspell Jones. Goose, always great having you on, man. You have yourself a great weekend. We'll continue to check in with you.
See you in November. Take care.
You got it. Goose Goslin on the Talk of Fame Network here each and every Sunday at WNST. And, of course, long-time Dallas Morning News. Goose is a real innovator. Goose is one of the first sports writers to really cover the draft and make coverage of the draft. And he sort of invented the mock draft. I don't want to, he may dispute that, but I won't. The first mock drafts I saw were from Rick Goslin at the Dallas Morning News. You can follow him at Rick Goslin, DMN, out on Twitter. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We even come in Austin and Houston and Waco and anywhere, El Paso. We come in everywhere in Texas via the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault and that TuneIn Radio app. Morning newspaper comes your way each and every morning at 7 a.m. It is brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. Also, breaking news. Anything happening out in Owings Mills or with the Ravens going to Indianapolis or with the Orioles hosting the Astros this weekend, any ups and downs and moves, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. That's for breaking news. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV. That's Sunday Sports Voice on WNST, now heard on Thursdays from 3 until 5. You can find me anytime, anywhere, praise, criticism, damnation, whatever you want to send my way, nasty@WNST.net. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, as well as Facebook Live and streaming via WNS TV on our YouTube channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Towson, Baltimore weekend long at Camden Yards against the Astros. Luke Jones will be on the scene for that, as well as on the backfields in Owings Mills as the Ravens head to Indianapolis in the friendly heart of the Midwest. This guy knows all of these NFL cities pretty well. Longtime NFL scribe at SI.com and Sports Illustrated. We welcome one of our defending champions back onto the program from the lovely burg of Brooklyn, New York. Don Banks joins us from Sports Illustrated. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Don Banks or at SI.com. Don, I mean, there is a word that you were spotted on the field at Owings Mills and spying on Joe Flacco. And I tell you what, all the national media coming in, it's very, very heartening to have Joe Flacco upright and throwing the football around, kind of the way he is right now.
Yeah, I was using the word locked in because the day I was there, I think it was a week ago, Monday, I barely saw the ball touch the ground. He told me that, the knee is really not on his mental radar screen. He feels like he can trust it and hasn't really had to clear much of a hurdle on that front at this point. He's excited. I feel like he's poised for a big bounce back year. The question is, how many others on Baltimore after that injury plague season are ready to bounce back as well? It's a very interesting team this year, Nestor, because I think we've always known kind of what to expect from Baltimore. But last year, it altered the perception a little bit, and I think a lot of us are wondering, does this team pick up kind of where it left off, always a playoff perennial contender, 10 to 11 wins, or was last year in any way the first sign of a team on a decline and getting a little older in some key spots? And that's what this year is about. And I think there's a little bit of a sense of urgency in Baltimore this year that there hasn't been in a number of years to kind of continue the program the way it has been under John Harbaugh and Ozzie Newsome.
Well, there has been an in Ozzie we trust. I mean, he's made every pick from the very beginning. There have been some Mark Claytons and some, Travis Taylors mixed in there. But by and large, there have been a whole lot more Joe Flacco's and Terrell Suggs and Ray Lewis and Ed Reeds. And, part of this problem they've had is they haven't drafted well the last couple of years. And I don't know about well, but if Perryman never gets on the field, it's a crappy draft pick, like Sergio Kindle, We haven't seen anything from him. Elam was injured and wasn't any good before that. Then you go through the whole Arthur Browns, and there have been a couple of nice C.J. Mosley, Brandon Williams. They need to step up. But the real question is, who are these young people they've drafted, and how can they become contributors the way so many successful guys did in order to lead to that Super Bowl 47 victory 3 years ago?
Yeah, they need to kind of find out a little bit about like Ronnie Stanley at left tackle. It obviously are banking on him big time, and as John Harbaugh said, who's going to be our young playmakers? Who's going to step up when the games are kind of hanging in the balance and make the plays that we need to win that day? There's a lot of, question marks. This team needs a Steve Smith to come back. This team needs a Mike Wallace to look more like the Mike Wallace of Pittsburgh than Minnesota and Miami era. This team needs Eric Weddle on defense to be everything that they think he is, and to still be kind of a force back there and to kind of help the entire secondary with his leadership, his experience, and the fact that he's still a playmaker. So I think it's as question mark filled Ravens team as we've seen in a long time. And that kind of adds to the sense of anticipation for this season.
Yeah, we're jacked up about it. He is Don Banks from SI.com. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Don Banks as well. And you mentioned the 3 W's, as we call them around here, Watson, Weddle, and Wallace. And it's funny, we didn't hear as much about Wallace because, Weddle has been a presence. Everyone in San Diego, anybody that's been around him, you could see it the first day out on the field. I've spent some time talking to him. Same thing with Ben Watson, this very literate, soft-spoken, well-spoken well-spoken, well-groomed, he doesn't look like a 30 or something guy. He looks like a guy you want on your football team and a guy who's a major contributor. Wallace is one of those guys that's a little bit out there in the abyss. We don't know what he is, and I've talked to people in Minnesota that said Bridgewater couldn't get him the ball, that he was open a lot, and Flacco really stepped up for him earlier this week and said, I like throwing the ball to him. He's a veteran guy. He looks different than some of the young guys around here.
Yeah, he talked a lot about Wallace finishing the top of his routes really well. I think it started kind of slowly first week of camp from what I was told, but the connection is growing. Look, they need his vertical threat. If he doesn't show up, that's going to be a signing that, albeit it was more of the bargain, bin type of free agent acquisition, that's a signing, though, that they're really counting on, to add the verticality, at least to the level they haven't had since Torrey Smith left, that Perriman hasn't been able to give him because he hasn't been healthy. Flacco seems excited and believes that there are some deep balls there to be taken advantage of each and every game. Wallace told me he knows people have written him off. He knows people have forgotten about him after the last 3 years of basically drawing a paycheck, but he believes that the chemistry and the karma is so close to what he experienced in Pittsburgh. He thinks it's going to rejuvenate his career and bring him back to closer to the level of the last time he was in the AFC North. He put in 4 pretty strong years in Pittsburgh, cashed out, went to Miami for 2, Minnesota for 1. I agree, Teddy Bridgewater and Ryan Tannehill really didn't have the skill set to really match up well with what Mike Wallace does best. Joe Flacco does. Joe Flacco's not, going to come up short on the deep ball very often at all. I think if Mike Wallace still has his legs, we're going to see that connection a lot more than we did with Miami and Minnesota.
Yeah, I've heard people tell me he's a real nice sort of fantasy pick for somebody out there to wonder who's going to play. I think he's going to be on the field. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to Steve Smith and Kamar Aiken, and obviously Perryman's a huge question mark. The running back position, and Harbaugh had a little off-the-record thing with the reporters the first day of camp, and part of the intrigue for all of us is who's going to run the ball. Forsett ran it as well as I've ever seen anybody run it, especially from hitting holes and the field vision that Forsett had. That's not going to go away for him. He looks like he's okay at this point. But, all these young pups they got running around out there, and Buck Allen and Dixon, and obviously Terrence West sort of on his last chance here trying to make it out of Towson State. That is much of a box of chocolates, and it's almost like an old-fashioned Harbaugh camp here where nobody's on scholarship. It's like best guy is going to win the job and carry the football, and I like a competition of 4 and they wanted Trent Richardson better than, we're just going to let this guy carry the ball because he has before.
Yeah, I got the sense that West was slightly in the pole position. They like kind of the downhill running style and his power running style. But I think this is going to be a multi-back type of backfield and approach, and I know they're excited about the rookie. Someone told me they thought that he was going to be their leading rusher next year. Keep an eye on him in the second half. He wouldn't be a bad fantasy late-round pickup. This, to me, is a team that is figuring its pieces out, and that's what August and early September is about for the Ravens.
Don Banks joining us here from SI.com. You've been some other places. You've been to Pittsburgh, and we haven't talked a lot about them. They have their own issues, on the field, off the field, and question marks on the defense. Some thoughts about what you saw in Latrobe last week? Well,
it's the most talented team I saw on my camp tour.
Wow. Okay.
They are. I mean, they offensively, if they could get everybody on the field at the same time, it wouldn't even be close. Defensively, they're counting on a couple things. They really believe that their young outside linebackers, they need Jarvis Jones to step up and finally rush the passer. I don't think he's had more than 3 sacks in any season. They feel like Ryan Shazier is now an established star at linebacker. They took 2 defensive backs, Artie Burns, the cornerback, Sean Davis, a safety. If things go as they hope, both those guys might be on the field a lot this season, and that is really the question mark. I don't have a lot of problems with their front 7. I think their defensive line was Stephon Tuitt, Cam Hayward are as talented almost as anybody in the AFC, but the back of their defense has been their weakness, and the cornerback position specifically. And they gave themselves an infusion of youth. They just needed to show up pretty quick. I don't have a worry about their offense. I know even with the suspensions that they're going to score and they're going to move the ball as long as Roethlisberger is upright. I think Sammy Coates is going to pretty much take up the Martavis Bryant role. Marcus Wheaton is probably a very solid number 2 at this point. Antonio Brown maybe productive-wise the best receiver in the game. Another concern is Ladarius Green, the tight end from San Diego. They signed him, thought they had the ankle surgery. Reports now of the lingering headaches. That's concerning because with Heath Miller retired, I think they really need a Ladarius Green-type weapon in the middle of the field. But still, Le'Veon Bell suspended for 4 games or not, D'Angelo Williams has enough to cover for them. That's a really potent team with a lot of reasons to worry a defense. I just think for the Steelers it comes back to how much are they going to give up in the back of their defense, and are they going to have to win in a shootout fashion some weeks?
Week 1, we draw the Buffalo Bills. I know you spent a little time upstate as well with Rex. They married Tyrod Taylor this week. We know that much, but who's going to play defense for them? And, you know, Rex doesn't have the pieces to the puzzle that he'd like to have there, I think.
Well, there's no team that's had a worse preseason just from a roster standpoint. I mean, it really started back in May when Shaq Lawson, their first-round draft pick, had the shoulder surgery that was reportedly on the way at some point, and is going to take him out probably for a month to 6 weeks, maybe even longer. And then it's just the hits keep coming after that. This week was Marcel Darius, 4-game suspension. He's one of the defensive leaders. They've had injuries. Obviously, Reggie Ragland, their rookie linebackers, out for the year. IK and Nempali gone for the year and waived already. He was being counted on to take up some of the slack for when Shaq Lawson was out of the lineup. This is a team that really has had a lot of body blows in the preseason. Carlos Williams, one of their fine young running backs, out for 4-game suspension to start the season. So they've signed a Reggie Bush, and they've added a Croy Bierman at the linebacker crew, and a Brandon Spike. So they're going and just kind of having to pick guys off the street, and that's never a really good formula. So I say the Ravens are fairly lucky to draw Buffalo in Week 1 because this is not the Bills team they thought they were going to have.
Giants or Jets up there in Brooklyn? Who you got, Don? Either one of them going to be a factor? Certainly the Jets came on last year and had the Fitzpatrick offseason, right?
Yeah, they had a tougher schedule for the Jets this year. Don't think they're going to surprise anybody, having won 10 games last year. I think it's going to be a tougher haul for the Todd Bowles team in year 2 than it was in year 1. I think they're more 8-8 material, and that's if Fitzpatrick at quarterback gives them everything he gave them last year, and I'm not sure he's going to. The Giants, to me, it all comes down to how quickly that defense that underwent, obviously, a pretty massive free agency overhaul comes together. And the track record for such things aren't great. We know that teams that have added that many pieces, it usually doesn't gel too quickly. The Giants are talking confidently about, Olivier Vernon and Janoris Jenkins and guys like that showing up immediately. I'm dubious, and I think even though I like where Ben McAdoo has the team headed, to me this feels, like another 6 to 8 win team and a transition year before New York is really playoff ready.
He is Don Banks of SI and SI.com. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Don Banks. Hey, man, from one Oriole fan to a Red Sox fan, fear the Blue Jays. That's all I can say for both of us.
No,
right?
They look like the best team, but somebody else is going to make it out of that division, so I'd like it to be Boston, although the Bucky men always play us very, very tough.
The men of Buck. Be careful. Be careful. Hey, have a great time, and we'll see you down here at some point watching some Ravens football, bud.
Thanks, Nestor.
You got it, Don Banks of SI.com. You can follow him at Don Banks on Twitter. No one covers the National Football League better than he does and better than SI does, quite frankly. Great job there. Always good to have the MMQB crew on as well, and we run into them from time to time. Great contributors to our program. We are very, very appreciative. You can find me out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear just about anywhere you are, even in all the 5 boroughs of New York. I'm headed out to Chicago this weekend to check a little Eddie Vedder out, so I'll be doing that. We'll be monitoring the Ravens and the Colts on Saturday night, and of course, keeping an eye on the Orioles all weekend as well, hosting the Houston Astros, the fading Houston Astros, as we will learn talking to some folks who are on the Astros beat this week here at WNST as well. Our morning newspaper reaches your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, and that is powered up, of course, by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. It is bikini season somewhere, and no better time than now to get in shape. Get on over there. It's $10. You can learn more at PlanetOfTriumphs.com. Get a little inspiration out there. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first here on the WNST Tech Service all weekend long. We'll have you in the loop if the Orioles make a move, if there's an up or a down or an injury, God forbid. You'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. That's brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here each and every Thursday driving you home with the SSV on WNST from 3 until 5 each and every Thursday. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.